Naughty Knots presents 3 Ways to Tie a Bowline. The bowline is a knot which, in most materials, will form a loop that does not slip. It can also be used to hitch a line to an object, and you can even use it to bend 2 lines to each other. The bowline is one of the most useful knots in existence. If you can only learn to tie one knot, learn to tie a bowline. Structurally, the bowline consists of 2 parts, a nipping loop and a collar. The nipping loop and the collar combine to form the knot. Note that the collar is formed around the standing end of the line and that the working end exits inside the loop. If the collar passes around a leg of the loop rather than around the standing end, then you have not properly tied the bowline. If the working end exits outside of the loop, then you also have not properly tied the bowline. Either way, you wind up with a different knot. The bowline can be tied in either a right-handed or a left-handed configuration. The two are simply mirror images of each other. If you're tying a bowline in 3-strand twisted line, which generally is right laid, there might be a slight advantage to tying the bowline in the right-handed form. But if you're tying it in braided line, as I have here, then there's no reason to prefer one over the other. That said, let's not. The first way I'm going to show you to tie a bowline is known as the rabbit and tree method. This is how I originally learned how to tie a bowline many years ago as a Boy Scout, and is a method that I still use today. You begin by imagining that the standing end of your line is a tree, and you make a rabbit hole in front of you by making a right-handed overhand loop. See that it runs counterclockwise and comes over. Now the working end, you say, is a rabbit. And the rabbit comes up out of the hole, runs behind the tree, and then back down the hole. And that makes your bowline. Now because this is a right-handed bowline, I have begun with a right-handed overhand loop, counterclockwise, and I have continued the same counterclockwise motion for the rabbit running around the tree and back down the hole. As long as you do them both counterclockwise or both clockwise, you will get a bowline, right or left-handed. If you switch to one right-handed, one counterclockwise and one clockwise, then you will wind up with the bowline where the tail exits outside the loop instead of inside. One nice feature of the bowline is that it is post-eye tieable. That means if you are tying the bowline to something, you can actually run the line through the object first and then completely form the knot afterwards. And one advantage of the rabbit and tree method is that if you are tying your line to something and it's sort of upside down from the orientation that you would normally tie, it's still fairly easy to do. You begin by making an overhand loop in the standing end in the tree. So here's your tree, and here's the rabbit hole, and the rabbit comes up through the hole, runs behind the tree, and back down the hole. And there's your bowline. The second way of tying a bowline is the boatswain's method. This is how an able seaman would tie this knot in hand. First of all, you grab the working end with a little bit sticking out from between your fingers, put it over the standing end, and twist it around towards you. You'll notice that this makes the overhand loop and puts the line through. So now all you do is pass the line behind the standing end, put it back through the nipping loop, and pull it tight. And that is how you tie a bowline by the bosun's method. The third way of tying a bowline I call the noose method. In this, you start out by tying a noose knot and then capsize it to form a bowline. So you start out by just grabbing part way up the line, make an overhand loop, and push the standing end through to form a noose, loosely tied. So that's a loosely tied noose knot. And you take the running end, you put it up through the noose, and simply pull. Pull on the standing end, and it capsizes into a bowline. There you have it, 3 ways to tie a bowline.